Hello and welcome to another episode of the Conversations on AI podcast. Today you'll hear me speaking with Hitesh Wadhwani and Mehul Patel about AI and its impact in the life sciences domain. We discuss specific AI applications, risks, and steps we need to take to ensure human well-being remains as the central driver. Hitesh is a client partner at a global tech firm and brings over 25 years' experience supporting clients across industries with a particular focus on life sciences. Hitesh was kind enough to join us as a panellist at our last Conversations on AI event, where we explored this same topic, so it was great to get a bit more time with him today. Mehul has spent 15 years as a senior leader in commercial IT within the biopharma industry, working at the intersection of technology, data, and business strategy. He brought a practitioner's lens to the conversation, having spent his career shaping how large organisations think about deploying IT responsibly and at scale in health sciences. We hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, so thank you both for joining. Really looking forward to this discussion today. To kind of kick us off, we'd like to talk a little bit about how you both envision and see AI broadly impacting life sciences and the world of medicine, and if there's any kind of specific AI tools or applications or trends that you're noticing at the minute that you're finding quite interesting within that domain. So, Mehul, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. It's a really interesting environment right now around, I think, the move for, how AI is now transforming. And I think I've seen a number of things around agentic AI. I think in the early days, it was very much proof of concepts with very discrete agents. It's now kind of moving past that to think about autonomous systems that propose design experiments, refine models. I think we've seen recently NVIDIA and Eli Lilly, for example, with their co-innovation lab. That's a huge $1 billion investment trying to kind of move and pioneer robotics and physical AI to accelerate and scale medicine. I think that's going to be a really exciting area to see how do we just accelerate those faster discovery to launch sequences. And then I think the other area, interestingly enough, it's, I work in commercial, but I think it's really at the other end, at the R&D end and the clinical trials. It's the last bottleneck, I think, around just being able to get traction on speed of, let's say, enrolling patients through to their execution. And I think the clinical trial landscape, I think, is going to be a really big change. And I think Merck and McKinsey partnership as well is looking at developing generative AI platforms just to streamline the clinical documentation that we're seeing. So I think a lot of different partnerships are coming as well within AI companies and also with pharma companies to kind of collaborate.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a trend you see in a lot of the big players in this space talk about the transformative potential of AI in clinical research and R&D and across that whole pipeline. So it's definitely one of the more interesting and optimistic application areas. Hitesh, how about yourself?
I would like to just take a step back and again just broadly talk about how AI is impacting life sciences. And really, from my perspective, I see three big shifts. First, it's helping pharma to fail faster and succeed sooner. By that, what I'm talking about is, the experimentation of drug development is a long cycle. It takes about 10 odd years to actually come up with something that's safer and more effective than what's currently available. And as technology evolves and its ability to analyze complex data sets becomes even better, it's really narrowing that gap that it takes to find those insights. And you can see that both in the research space, you can see it within protocol design, within clinical trials, with regulatory submissions, scientific literature searching. So it's helping shorten that gap, the time gap it takes to actually develop something new. So it helps pharma fail faster, which is great. I also think that, as we all live longer, the demand for new medicine has never been greater. So therefore, you see manufacturing plants using AI quite extensively now. And that's all aimed at increasing capacity, output, and quality. So a lot of that's happening. And again, there are a plethora of different technologies and tools which are being used. So that's the second big shift. It is enabling more medicine for everyone. And third, and this is in Mehul's area, it is helping bridge that last mile by connecting, the makers of the medicine, the pharmaceutical companies, with the consumers of the medicine, the patients. So it's ensuring that people from the commercial and medical affairs teams are able to connect and engage more effectively with doctors, health systems worldwide, and it's having a very big impact along every part of the domain, really, if you think of it. Now, in terms of the specific trends that I'm seeing, I do see that there's going to be a big evolution of the AI as we know it today. So all of us as consumers are used to the new chat option within a Claude or a Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT, etc. I think Mehul mentioned agentic as the keyword here. So you're going to be seeing a new task as an option next to your new chat, where you have these agents which can run with a certain goal and a certain boundary and do things. And so you will see the new chat running on Copilot Actions, Gemini Agent, Claude Cowork already, and even OpenAI Operator. So you'll see these tools coming in. But I also think that this is not where it stops. So the big evolution really will be taking that chat, which is very reactive help, task-based, the new task, which is all nice but not complex, not able to handle complex tasks, to something even bigger. So I do see that in time there's going to be a new problem option there also, where agents can actually work with human teams and solve complex problems, which doesn't happen today. So, for instance, if you were to actually ask that new problem, find me the route to optimize this synthetic molecule and find ways of reducing impurities, consult with our ESG team and ensure that it complies with policy, you will have agents and humans interacting just via the simple interface. So I think AI is going to have a massive impact on life sciences in general, and we are already seeing this evolution happen today.
Can I just make one more point? Because actually it came to me, one of the things that it's optimistic, but it's very early days, right? And I always think with life sciences and getting to patients, I think precision medicine and digital twins, just with the bio-digital twinning, merging the simulations for AI with trials, and being able to test drug candidates on a virtual patient. I mean, it's far-flung right now, right? But I can see the vision of the future once you can trust the technology and the guardrails around it, starting to make inroads into many of these areas that we've not been able to do at speed in the past or easily in the past, right? And that's an interesting one that I think, I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open for.
Absolutely. I think the potential for simulations and creating artificial environments where you're able to kind of test out products or even therapy sometimes. I've seen a lot of really interesting kind of proof of concept applications in mental health where they're creating simulated environments to kind of test out therapies for patients. And, that's quite a ethical domain in terms of if you test out a product or you test out a therapy and actually it doesn't work so well. So being able to create effective simulated environments where you can do that, the potential is quite clear. So you've both kind of touched on in your answers benefits and kind of some of the gaps that AI is hoping to fill there, but is there any other clear benefits you kind of wanted to elaborate on?
There are loads of benefits. I mean, the biggest one is the fact that you can do things without actually having to run real experiments and actually to be able to do things in a digital way using the current technologies and also robotics. I mean, those are game changers for this industry. I mean, Mehul mentioned digital twins. NVIDIA is able to run and automate labs entirely by using its BioNeMo platform coupled with its Omniverse technology, where a scientist can actually see an experiment, run something complex without ever opening a vial. And that means that, again, they are again able to hit that roadblock faster. They're able to find ways of discovering or developing something a lot quicker. So I do think that's a game changer. Again, Mehul also mentioned robotics. I think that is absolutely immense. I do believe that there's going to be a rise of robotics or physical AI, specifically in dark labs. So in today's day, you have scientists who come into work, run experiments, go home. Tomorrow, they're going to be supplemented with robotics who don't just move samples from one bench to the other, but effectively work on the same bench using scientifically controlled experiments, and they operate those experiments in a controlled manner. And that can happen even when the scientist has gone home. So the experimentation doesn't stop, hence the term dark labs. They can turn the light off and the robots will continue working. So I do see that also being a game changer in just in terms of scientific productivity. And also, again, the speed to finding that next big promising drug.
And if I could just add a couple of things, right, Stella and Hitesh, I think I'd be looking at it more from an enterprise evolution lens. It really is, for me, when I think about other technology kind of revolutions, this is very different in terms of the benefits that will bring to an enterprise. And I think about things very simply around, we replace a process from X to Y. This is really about reimagining how you work, what you work. And it's not about, there's also fear around replacing people. It's actually freeing people up, I would say, to do more meaningful work within the organization. Because today it's labor intensive. There are barriers to execution, which you will be able to kind of almost like, disappear with the introduction of, responsible AI, I would call it, right? And the final piece, I think, is really around cost reallocation. And I always think about, OPEX, and I think about working for a large global pharma company. It's an expensive business, and you really have to optimize how you operate. And I think with AI, you start to get a lot of cost reallocation, reducing potential dependencies on external sort of agencies, for example, to do translations. If you think about every market in a global company having to do that, and you compound that, but then you can get tools internally which you can, reimagine the way people work with getting to their outcomes, whether it be for campaigns, whether it be for training, whether it be for clinical documentation, sort of FDA kind of information. There's a whole heap of use cases around where AI can reimagine the way work gets done. And one final point, I call it sweating existing assets. We have got such a heavy footprint in SaaS-based solutions, and each of those providers are coming along now with their, would I call it a bolt-on, but their product is evolving to include AI. And so, there's opportunities to really, I would say, sweat those assets, unlock those capabilities sitting in those investments.
I agree. I think there are tremendous opportunities, and I think this is a technology which is certainly disruptive. I don't think I see it replacing people. I do see it augmenting, staff in every part of the domain. I already see that happening within the research space. I see, even plant operators and technicians in manufacturing, in the manufacturing side, using AI, so augmenting their work with AI. I still don't think that that the technology is ready to replace any of them. Certainly, I don't see that happening for a very, very long time. What I will say is, look, the cost of AI is expensive. It's it's not a simple solution. And also, you got to treat AI as a new power source almost. While the big developers, the model developers are bringing this new amazing power source at your doorstep, you still have to modify your internal circuits to work with this new power. So that reimagination is really about modifying your existing architecture. So the role of the architect is absolutely immense here. Modifying your internal organization. to adapt and learn how to use, embed AI in every application, in every system that you've got to support your business. I also feel that the demand for AI infrastructure is continuous. It's not going away. It's ever increasing, and there's a need for again a zero trust architecture, so you can use all these SaaS tools confidently and connect them to lab instruments, connect them to plant devices within plants, to get the most out of AI. So there's still a lot of potential, and I believe we are still at the cusp of its evolution. So I would say we are just literally at the foothills of what this technology could do for the industry.
Absolutely. So you're both kind of touching there on some of the considerations for deployment around interoperability and making sure that the individuals that are using these tools understand how they use them so that they can actually have their capabilities augmented. So maybe let's take a quick step back and talk a little bit about some of those risks. So Mehul, maybe do you want to kick us off with, life sciences is a particularly high risk domain. We're talking about developing medicines that we're going to be trialing out with people, and it's really really high impactful work. So if we are going to deploy AI along that operation chain, what are some of the risks involved there?
No, it's actually the really fundamental question, I think, when we're thinking about deploying AI responsibly. I think most pharma companies have what we would call business compliance, and governance and ethics frameworks. They don't need a bolt-on for AI. They need a redesign, because there's a fundamental shift in what needs to be considered, moving from even simple terms like deterministic systems to probabilistic systems, right? You're no longer in a traditional system that says, put in X, you get out Y. Logic has to be traceable, especially in, let's say, highly regulated GXP environments. You have to be able to move away from that opacity, that whole sort of vagueness of how did we arrive at this outcome. The auditability and the traceability, and I would also say the transparency of how you get to your outcomes and your decisions are critical. And so your whole ethics and governance framework needs to kind of not necessarily have an overhaul, but you need to really think about how you put those guardrails in, and I would say one other thing, controls are based on risks. So if you think about every area of where you're introducing AI, the classification of the risk, high, medium, low, with the relevant controls, they have to be defined almost up front. You can't be kind of thinking, okay, we've kind of gone this far down the line. Now let's think about how do we mitigate risk further along. So operating model, thinking about how people will engage, which people you need within the organization, cross-functional teams to build that ethics framework for AI is, I think, going to be crucial. And then the security aspect. I think risks come with infrastructure and security and locking down external threats and threats to your IP, your reputation, and just credibility around, what you spent time building in the industry. So I think those things. One final thing I'll say, and you can see I'm quite passionate about this because I'm actually doing a course at the London School of Economics at the moment on this, which is human in the loop. Mm. And I think people are your critical piece here around risk, because you genuinely need them to be skilled in different skill sets now, because it's replacing human judgment with AI judgment and decision making. And so when I think about it, it's about analytical, critical thinking, and equipping people to have psychological safety, around decisions they're making based on an outcome they're seeing. Now that skill set piece, I think, is a risk as well. It's not a physical risk, technical risk. It's a people to your business risk, and how you operate.
That's interesting, Hitesh. I was just about to bring you in because I know that that's one of the trends you spoke about on the panel. So I guess I'll pose the question, then you can elaborate how you'd like to, Hitesh. But where do you think, to Mehul's point around replacing critical or bringing in AI to critical thinking, decision making, where do you think we draw the line, or where should we draw the line there?
I think we're at this stage where it tends to be, the development of AI is running faster than how how much we can comprehend it to be. So the good thing is regulators are actually catching up. So I see, for instance, within the EU Annex 22 in manufacturing, they've got defined ways of almost asserting explainability into the process. So AI must be able to explain why it rejected a batch as faulty in manufacturing. It also covers things like segregation of data. So the data used to test the system must be different from the data that was used to train it. So that's something that, again, is covered by regulators. And regulators have also thought about human in the loop. So any high complex activity must be signed off by a human. So I think the risks are being controlled. But during the panel, I did mention, that we should not give up our critical thinking to a system. The pressures of the industry are so immense, with certainly so many drugs becoming out of patent, and then so many launches which are imminent in the next few years, that every organization is trying to be the first in class, best in class in any therapy area that they operate in. And they are looking at AI to solve some of those big challenges around biology and then chemistry. So I think the biggest risk is, pharma as an industry loses a little bit of control that it's very well known for. And I think, it's one to watch out for as things develop. Overall, I'm still confident because, in my experience, what I'm seeing is that that age or the time for random experimentation is definitely shrinking. And most organizations are now saying, well, we want to look at 5 big bets here with AI and 6 or something like that, some small number, and run with those. So problem, being more specific, prioritizing, and using a probability model to use AI in certain areas. But the risks are real if you just try and go after everything.
So would you say that the how this is translating into the market is the hesitancy is kind of felt, but in order to manage that, people are doing targeted proof of concepts and test beds with AI applications within their companies?
Yeah, so again, at the ground level, you have people who are trying to see every new tool that's out there. They're trying to understand what this can do versus what that can do. I mean, vibe coding has certainly helped solve individual problems in certain areas. But then at a corporate level, you've got these governance structures just still being established. And at some point, both of them will come together. So you will have the rules of engagement, boundaries, etc., defined at a corporate level. And then the intelligence gathered from these niche tools and niche providers come together in a way. At the moment, that's still a little bit further away from where we are today. But I do see that happening, really.
Maybe I could just add one more point, right? Because it's come to me in terms of thinking around a risk. And it's an interesting risk because I think the bandwagon risk, which is we need AI to solve a problem, as opposed to thinking, what's my enterprise strategy? What's my corporate strategy? And then working out where does AI unlock that value? And I saw that quite, I've seen that firsthand. I've seen 2 markets want the same AI-enabled capability going down 2 different solution sets, because there isn't a joined up cross-functional enterprise lens on AI necessarily. It's all bottom up. And so I think, you could end up with quite a lot of fragmentation and duplication and not really a clear strategy around how you scale. And I think the pilot to scaling only succeeds if you've got a really clear understanding of how this impacts across the enterprise to leverage and utilize the capabilities that you're bringing to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is great. I mean, we've spoken about some of the applications and trends you guys are finding interesting, and then some of the risks that are associated with them. So the central question of the most recent Conversations on AI event, which Hitesh was a panelist on, was how do we ensure that we keep human well-being as the central driver of AI in health services, and that includes life sciences. So I guess what does that mean to you both? Hitesh, maybe you can kick us off. How do we keep human well-being as the central driver of AI in life sciences?
Stella, I think human well-being is the driving force for the life sciences industry. The industry can get to patients quicker with AI, with better identification and diagnostics, and also understand target conditions quicker with things like computational biology. Without AI, all this progress would be a lot slower. I think from a treatment perspective, pricing has to cover huge development costs. We know that for every new drug that's launched, we've already paid for lots of dead ends. So if AI can help pharma fail fast, it can eliminate this tax on failure, and that's a good thing. Patients do need to feel this benefit with better access and affordability of medicines. I think human well-being can also be seen from the lens of the workforce. Technology doesn't take away jobs, it does take away tasks and it can solve problems. I think AI is giving all of us a huge opportunity to not just do things differently, but to do different things. So, if you're a life sciences leader, perhaps the question you want to think about is what problems will you want to solve with AI? And if you're a scientist, a rep, or someone else in the industry, what will you do with all the time that it saves you? One word of caution though, I think as we get more dependent upon the technology, agents can't be operating on their own and making decisions that no one fully understands. That's why governance, setting clear boundaries, securing information, perhaps even life cycle management of agents and tools, these are concepts that need to be thought through. Ultimately, in an industry where there's a lot to do, we must never lose sight of its mission, which is about putting patient well being over all else. Mehul, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought about this question. Actually, it was quite an interesting one because it's a different dimension, but a really key critical one. And I kind of thought, well-being, if you think about it in the context of AI, it has to be a design principle and not a risk mitigation checkbox, right? And what do I mean by that? Is who's it affecting? How will they experience it? What guardrails do we have to protect people? You know, well-being is all around psychological safety. If there's pressure to trust outputs you don't understand, or the fear it creates of making mistakes, then I think there's an uncertainty around how people will interact with what they're seeing in AI, right? To override, there's anxiety about being replaced, for example, right? And these are real experiences that I think as an organization you have to kind of embed, quite integrally into your AI kind of strategy. And then I think the term I kind of thought about was enabling versus disabling, right? Does it expand what humans can do, or does it create dependencies and erode confidence? It's an interesting one because I think the moment it starts replacing judgment without supporting it, we move into disablement. And so I think for well-being of, I guess, the workforce, those things, and I think to Hitesh's point, this all comes back to why we all here in the health life sciences is to improve the lives of patients, right? And safety in that domain is probably paramount in terms of being able to ensure people have guardrails to know what AI is bringing for them versus, the societal risk.
Yeah. Comes. So I guess you're both touching on kind of keeping the central focus of what health science and life science is about, and yeah, keeping that steady and holding it in even when we apply AI into different applications. You've both kind of touched on some themes around training and organizational design, so I'd just kind of like to deep dive into that a bit more. Hitesh, you mentioned that it's important to keep AI as an augmenter of critical thinking, but how do you kind of foresee that interaction between human and AI happening in terms of what people need to understand about the technologies and how they need to know how to use them in order to keep their critical thinking central?
See, I think, first of all, we can't stop learning. So the technology is moving fast enough, or faster than any of us can imagine, really. So we cannot stop and say that I know AI now, because that's not going to happen. The AI, will change again tomorrow morning. So that's the first thing. I think the role of on an individual basis, it's up to all of us to understand what we can learn and how we can use the technology. At an organizational level, I think the role of the architect is absolutely immense because they fundamentally understand how organizations are structured, as is the role of the change management team. So the business change, the technology change. Again, pharma as an industry just generally does not like changing fast enough, and they are being forced to do something which is, very, very relevant and promising, but equally they're not set up for it. So change management is a big part of actually training your own internal organization.
Mm.
At a leadership level, I think what I am seeing is a trend where a lot of companies are enabling their entire ecosystem, their entire employee ecosystem to learn about the tools they plan on using, which is a positive thing. So I think enterprise-wide, there are initiatives there for everyone to explore and benefit from and learn from. But really, I think all of us have to go together on this journey and not do our own things, because that's when disconnects can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to hear you say about change management. That's my background. I used to work in change management consulting, so I was constantly banging the drum of how important they are, especially for AI, I think, because there's a lot of, to your point, Mehul, about the psychological safety. I think AI can bring up a lot of psychological discomfort for people because it's so widely spoken about, not just at work, but more broadly, and there's a lot of discourse around the benefits and the cons of it. So kind of acknowledging that within the workspace is really important to get people on board with that journey. Mehul, is there anything you'd like to add to that, I guess?
No, I think she's covered a lot of it. And what I will say, and it's something I've seen, is AI means different things to different people, depending on your interaction levels with it. If you're in the workspace, you're kind of doing sort of workforce productivity, right? And most people have kind of had some experience now with Microsoft Copilot or similar type of productivity kind of tools, which are personal. But it means different things. Most people have used Claude or ChatGPT or some AI tooling to kind of help them with their own personal stuff, or their productivity stuff. Where this gets really interesting is AI literacy across the enterprise and what it means for the enterprise. And I think that AI literacy piece is at the heart of, any organization that's moving to a transformational change like this, a technological change of this magnitude. I think having consistency of language and understanding of what do these terms mean, what do they do, and how do people navigate those, is where you start to hopefully ingrain some sense of perspective and understanding across the enterprise. And then when you're bringing programs of work through to enable AI, there's a bit more connective to what the outcomes might be and what that might impact on individuals. They start to ask the right type of questions to help them along the journey. And I think that AI literacy piece is critical.
Mm. Do you both, is your experience, I guess in a professional capacity, been organisations are asking for this and they can recognise the importance of AI literacy?
I guess from just quickly on my perspective, I think it's bottom up. And I think it depends on function to function and parts of the organization that are some are more mature than others. But I think this is really, it transcends that. It's not function by function for me. It has to be done at enterprise leadership, strategic layer, and then permeate downwards.
I agree. See, the need to become AI literate is definitely felt by everyone. As an individual and even at the organization level. I think recently we've run sort of almost workshops or classes on how to use Copilot Studio as an example. and the demand for that has been tremendous. So people have come in, or senior leaders have come in to actually understand how they can build their own agents and connect them, integrate them to their own ecosystems. So clearly the demand is there, and equally from a provider's perspective, the need to educate clients is also there. I think it's going in the right direction, but definitely I think there is a growing need, and it won't end because the technology is changing fast enough where literacy, how to use the next version of AI to do the same, to do different things, would always be there.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, just to navigate change, it just helps every individual within that organization kind of process what might be happening and have some resemblance of, okay, I get this. Or if I don't, then I know I've got support for where I can understand this better. And that's the journey, I think, that's continuous.
Yeah, it's similar to both of your points. I think any other previous technological transformation or technological implementation, these are the kind of trends we're seeing of people need to understand what the technology is, what its limitations are, how it can benefit them and actually complement their job. Bringing it, I guess, back to or more closely to life sciences, are there any literacy considerations that you think organisations should know if they're using an AI application within the life sciences supply chain or R&D life cycle or testing out a product, any of the applications that you've mentioned?
The thing with AI experimentation, it just can't be random. So I think being able to understand what the AI tool is doing, systems that it is connecting to, how safe is it, how safe your data is, and also use and misuse. As long as those are clear, and the actual experimentation is within a contained environment, I think those are important things to consider. From a literacy perspective, again, it really comes down to absorbing and actually balancing the benefits and also the long-term implications of the technology. So trying to understand how it can be used in a particular use case and how you can scale that use case. At the moment, we tend to all get excited about these new things. You can do this, you can do that, etc. And vibe coding plays into a lot of that, right? A number of those solutions and individual things don't scale. And this is where I think the hype tends to run away. I mean, we've had hype around AI replacing software, AI replacing lawyers. None of that's going to happen. And I believe that, as long as we understand what its limitations are, what it's doing, we are comfortable with its use, misuse, and the risk of misuse rather, then we're on the right path for it.
I think I would just add, when I think about life sciences, and as you say, right, Stella, it's a highly regulated environment. For me, it's about being able to ask the right questions. If you are in a program of work which is having AI enablement in a critical area, do you understand the risks that you should be exploring? Do you have the language within your repertoire to be able to go, what is model drift? Do I understand what model drift is? Do I understand what bias is, for example? Just those simple words that bring in ethical considerations and guardrails, the continuous monitoring, the whole kind of ability to kind of say, I understand the landscape that this is going to operate in, and now I can ask the questions that will help us ensure that we're protecting or we are taking enough, sort of precaution around how we're going to move forward with it. We've answered all those the difficult questions that need to be answered. And you need to have literacy across the organization, cross-functionally, because different groups will bring different perspectives on the potential risks or the potential considerations that you need to, at least think through.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any areas that you think across the life sciences kind of delivery life cycle and implementation that are most critical, where if you're advising an organization, this is somewhere where you should really focus your risk management and your education of your employees, and this is where maybe you need to have a bit of an org design to make sure that if we do implement AI within this area, this is where this is how you can manage it safely?
I think it's the data for me. When I look at organizations, I think pharma as an industry has got a lot of legacy, not just in terms of data, but also ways of working. And AI is something that requires curated and analysis-ready data. So it does need to be, data has to be paramount here in actually getting the most out of AI. So organizations have to ensure that they fix that legacy, and that's the baggage in many ways that some of the biotechs of the world don't have, because they don't have those legacy systems, and that's why they're able to move a lot faster. So as long as organizations can fix that, um, then it opens up a lot of possibilities to use AI effectively versus slowing the development down. So that for me is always a concern that comes up whenever I speak to clients and is talk to people within the industry.
Are there any kind of data management approaches that you've recommended more than others? I know that federated data management can sometimes work, but more centralized approaches, you can have a bit more of a tighter control over them, which maybe works better in life sciences, but I don't know what your views are there.
I think so. Again, the data challenge is quite immense within life sciences. So as instruments, for instance, in research systems get modernized, they're spitting out a lot more data than previously used to happen. So there is a lot of data which is being produced, but there's a big disconnect between how data is produced and how data is consumed. And the way to fix that disconnect is actually take a step back, understand the end-to-end structure here of how your data is currently set up, how is it analyzed, can you do things differently? Because AI is not going to get cheap by any ways, by any means. So I think when there's more data to analyze, your cloud costs are going to increase, and therefore there is a need to actually leverage as much of the internal compute that you've got within your ecosystem with private cloud, etc. Also, so what's the approach? The approach is really, I think back, look at your data architecture, look at issues around lineage and quality, and certainly have that observability built in. But don't just randomly go ahead with experimentation without knowing where your data is, how is it being used. Just looking at the end result versus the code and actually understanding how it was modified during the process. So I think those are some of the things that come up in discussions. But every organization has fundamentally slightly different approaches to how they manage the challenge. But which is why the data challenge is always very interesting.
Mehul, how about you? Any particularly high-risk areas along the development implementation lifecycle?
I think to Hitesh's point, the data is key, right? I think models are run on data and trust that the outputs that you receive, if they are not, trustable, if you've got fragmented data, you haven't really thought through how you're going to consume that, then that's where the risks do come in. And I think, within life sciences, you've got so many areas within the end-to-end processes which are governed by, either GXP or SOX, and all these regulatory kind of landscapes which, demand that traceability and transparency of how you got to your outcomes and safety. End of the day, we talk about, many of these things impacting on patients. And so safety, patient care, where do you augment versus replace, in terms of patient care? And I think that's a question that I think is still going to stay open for quite a long time around the boundaries, around human requirements to trusting AI totally. But I would say, in certainly R&D, manufacturing, where you've got to really think through, we will get there at some point in many of these areas, but they're the more complex cases, I would say. Commercial, commercial is all about connecting to our healthcare professionals who then connect to our patients necessarily. Again, you've got to really think through how your reputation, your kind of positioning with each HCP, and some of these are really important key opinion leaders, how you connect with them is going to be really important around, just risks that can be introduced if you don't consider what the outcomes would be on data you provided them.
I also want to quickly add that, look, in the last few weeks, we've heard this noise around AI replacing software, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that data is now being pushed behind paywalls so that general tools can't access them. So the data challenge is not easy. I think for an organization, for pharma organization, there's a lot of private data that cannot be exposed because that's really those are the crown jewels really of that organization. You can't expose them to models just because of the inherent risk of that. So I think the data challenge isn't getting addressed anytime soon. What I do believe is that there has to be that big picture thinking about actually what do we expose, what are we trying to achieve, can we contain what we need to, can we expose what we need to, can we share what we need to, because data sharing is also a big part of a lot of the work that's done. So a lot of thinking has to still go into how AI is used within life sciences to actually get the most out of it. Fundamentals still don't change. You still have to ensure that AI can use your data. And in many cases, that's still not there today.
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I think effective data management, maintenance, keeping it, governed properly is a huge, huge undertaking. And that was one of the topics that came up quite a lot at the previous event. It was mentioned the kind of trade-off between informed consent and sharing your health data, but then the public good of the benefit that it could provide if we have a data resource where you can then perform R&D on it and develop drugs that have a huge, tremendous benefit to society. And where do you draw the line there? And I'll pose that question to you both of where do you draw the line between wanting to respect individuals' right to decide whether or not they share their health data versus actually the public good of collecting individuals' health data for the potential R&D and drugs that could be developed from it?
I think it's a good point, right? I think privacy and consent in a data set that is personal to you being shared for greater good for the population is secondary, because I think most people will be fearful for where that data is used and how it's consumed and what it's actually used for, and do they trust that because of history around misuse of data in personal information. I mean, there are guardrails, right? We've got GDPR and let's say in Europe, and we've got the EU AI Act. But many jurisdictions don't have yet clear regulations around AI and consent and just fit for use. And I don't see that. I find that a challenge, personally, around, I've spoken to people around just being comfortable, with sharing data of a personal nature, which is health, your own, because of just how it may get used and misused. And so I think until you get that mindset shift more holistically around people and prove it a little bit, I don't think, you will shift that needle very, very fast. I think it's a difficult one. You could anonymize data. There's different ways you can do it. But again, what can you anonymize to use effectively?
Yeah, it's really hard to anonymize health data as well because it's so identifiable just by when you collate it. It's very, everyone's health journey is very specific. It sounds like it kind of comes back to some of the themes that we've been talking about throughout of educating individuals, making sure that people understand what the tool, if their data is being used for an AI tool, for instance, what that tool is going to be used for, how their data contributes towards that, and then providing assurance that it will remain just for use of this tool and it won't go anywhere. But it is, it's a very difficult and personal decision. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. I think it would be interesting to pose the question to you both of, are there any areas of life sciences or health sciences more broadly that you don't think AI can reach?
Mehul, you should go for this one first. Come on.
that's an open-ended question, because you hope the AI will solve for many, many different opportunities, and as it evolves over time. I still come back to sort of the kind of the patient, not necessarily diagnostics, but when I think about patients being informed about their treatment options and things like that, and having access to information now is scary, because you can imagine. I can imagine me going onto ChatGPT and saying, "I've got a red rash. I've got this, and this," and it comes up with something, and then I go and see a GP or a healthcare professional. I'm now almost a pseudo doctor having a conversation with a doctor and a healthcare professional who should know more. And so I think there's challenges around how do you give people opportunity to learn something about themselves, but then trust a professional and not AI. Because I think complacency sets in at some point, because you're using AI so much to do so many different things in your life, that health is just another one where it starts to feed, the not necessarily misinformation, but the trust in the data to kind of go, this is my treatment options, and this is where I want to, kind of end up with being better. And I don't know whether we'll ever solve that one. I find that a little bit interesting. And then secondly, I would say, I think procedures. I think robotics are coming, and how comfortable will people be with moving from a physical to a robot augmented or environment where they're not feeling a human is in control of the process. I think that's going to be quite an interesting one as well.
Yeah, definitely. You can anticipate a bit of friction there. I think people, health delivery particularly, is such an intimate and caring situation often, and I think there's going to be inevitable friction of having a non-human there, kind of trying to deliver something that requires a bit of empathy and intimacy and care. Definitely. I would find it, I think, a bit strange if it were me and I was in the hospital bed and there was a robot there. But I don't know, people get used to things, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Hitesh, how about you?
See, first of all, I don't think there is any area of life sciences that AI cannot touch. It can certainly touch every aspect of life sciences. I spoke about the evolution of AI earlier, and I really think that's going to happen. So it's going to go from being a reactive research agent to something which is more than just a task agent, to something that is fully interactive. So it can say, I think I've noticed a red rash on you, Mehul. Maybe you should go and speak to your doctor about X, Y, and Z. But I won't suggest a treatment for you unless you asked and said, what could be the treatment. But, that interactive thing is going to happen. I think robotics will happen.
Yeah.
There will be certain aspects of robotics which will make life amazingly beneficial for all people within the science industry. So if you're a scientist working in a lab, the ability to do experiments at scale would be immense. Equally, if you're stuck in a hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to hold a robot's hand. You'd rather reach out for the nurse if you needed, some support there. So there are limitations in the wider ecosystem, but overall, I think I'm quite positive around the evolution of AI, around robotics. I think the rise of physical AI is inevitable, and it's going to be really, really beneficial, both in research and clinical development and in manufacturing. It'll just be everywhere. So I do see that we are in for some positive times ahead in life sciences.
That's kind of touching on the final question of what are you both most optimistic about? Hitesh, it sounds like for you it's reactive and personalized agents within the life sciences domain.
It's definitely the experience. I think the ability to analyze data to find things a lot faster will result in those drugs being developed, which will benefit all of us. I think businesses today are investing in AI not for the current tools that are there today. They're investing to realize the potential that drives their companies effectively. So if you're an organization which wants to solve certain type of problem with cancer or with neuroscience, and that's your mission statement, AI is helping you reach that statement, that goal, and that's what they're investing in. So I'm quite positive that the technology itself is going fast enough where this will happen. I think as long as they are able to reconfigure their internal wiring to use this technology, have those change agents in place, not ignore their architects, and then there's lots of positives to look forward to.
Now, just add one last thing. I think to Hitesh's point, I think the optimism here is a really moving from acceleration from scientific discovery to patient impact, right? I think it's just getting, even if you can compress that timeline modestly, right? Getting that human impact is pretty profound, but it comes with a condition, which is trust. The data, the governance, the humans operating alongside it, and trust from the patients themselves, right? I think at the end of the day, this is why we're all here, is to genuine care and investment in trying to improve people's lives. And so, there's a huge amount of trust that comes with this whole environment.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you both so much. This has been a fantastic discussion. I feel like I've really enjoyed it and learnt a lot. So really appreciate you both joining the podcast today.
Great. No, thank you, Stella, and thank you, Hitesh, for the call out to join.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Stella. Really appreciate this. Thank you.